Emotional issues don't get better by avoiding them. Not much does. Let me say that again. Emotional issues don't get better by avoiding them. One step further, they build on each other. They grow. They get even worse. Pain and bitterness that's not transformed will be transferred. Pain and bitterness that's not transformed will be transferred to somewhere else in your life. It's like the biblical story of Jonah and the whale. When God told Big Jonah, you can run, but you can't hide, homie, right? From God or your emotions. You can't outrun, outwork, or avoid your emotional injuries. At some point, you have to face them or continue to live with the ever-growing consequences of not facing them. And over the past 20 years, I've been a part of at least 10 different startup businesses, from network marketing to, executive coaching, to we did some government contracting businesses with special operations soldiers, to medical imaging centers. I've been a limiting factor in each of those experiences due to my very low EQ or emotional intelligence. The final straw was when I yelled at my wife 3 or 4 times in the span of about a month. She came up to me, and she's like, bro, check this out. I got 3 things. Number 1, don't ever do that again. Don't ever yell at me again. Number 2, you've never done this before, which means number 3, you got issues, bro. Something is wrong with you. She was right, 100% right. I had no defense. I had no argument. I had no comeback. She smacked me in the face with the truth. My emotional King Kong had finally reached a point where I couldn't stuff and avoid any longer. I had held the basement doors closed for 4 decades, trying to keep him under control. I had been feeding him this whole time with no awareness and understanding of what I was doing until finally I couldn't hold him or my emotions and feelings hostage any longer. He busted out.
Welcome to the EQ for Entrepreneurs podcast. Like most business owners, you already know you need good business and marketing strategies to scale and be profitable. But at some point, you've hit the dreaded wall where you feel stuck and frustrated. EQ for Entrepreneurs is for business owners and leaders who are honest enough to admit that they just might be the ones holding their business back and are brave enough to change that.
We're Noble and Kathy, and every week we're having candid conversations about all things emotional intelligence and how growing that has allowed us to get out of our own way and is radically transforming both our businesses and our personal lives. This is the secret sauce strategy for modern entrepreneurs who are tired of hustling without seeing results and want to grow a business and a life that they love.
What is up, entrepreneurs, leaders, and influencers? Welcome to this episode sharing the backstory of why we started our EQ for Entrepreneurs podcast, YouTube channel, and business. Thank you all for your continued support, encouragement, and feedback. Thank you for the comments on our YouTube channel, for the rating and reviews of our podcast. Totally, absolutely appreciate it. Thank you for sharing the podcast with your friends and coworkers that may need some encouragement and support in the area of their own, emotional growth journey. So I began my personal relationship with the Lord at 8 years old and spent a ton of time in God's Word. I was super spiritual, right, with the borderline religiosity and legalism, but to everyone on the outside, I was a good Christian kid with no apparent issues. I grew up in a house with 2 loving parents, not quite Leave It to Beaver, but close. I had a great sister. My folks stayed married the whole time, and all under the surface, I grew up completely emotionally unaware. Seriously. We would yell and scream at each other and then come back 30 minutes or an hour later as if nothing happened. They taught me very quickly, or what that experience taught me very quickly, was that feelings and emotions don't matter, which is very untrue. And I learned how to stuff and avoid my feelings and emotions. Another huge consequence of being raised in a house where feelings and emotions were never acknowledged, recognized, or discussed was I became addicted to people pleasing. I subconsciously sought out validation and affirmation from anyone who would give it to me. Try growing up where your entire decision-making process revolved around what other people thought. What kind of consequences does that leave in its wake? I developed massive insecurity. I was completely unaware of my feelings and emotions. I only cared about what everyone else thought about me. I was hypersensitive. God forbid someone didn't like me or approve of me, or even worse, reject me. It was catastrophic. We had absolutely no boundaries in my family to add on to that. What's mine is yours and what's yours is mine, even with our meals. Seriously. Remember, I'm a Christian this whole time. I love Jesus. I'm in God's word. I'm praying, but I still had a truckload of all these emotional issues just growing in the basement of my heart, soul, and mind. And now, ta-da, I'm ready for adulthood, right? You kidding me? That's crazy. Then I go off to West Point, got married after West Point, graduate Airborne School and Ranger School, become an infantry officer in the 82nd Airborne Division. So here I enter adulthood with a truckload of undealt emotional issues. And the crazy thing is that I do fairly well. You know, at West Point and in the 82nd, I was a top block officer in the military. And I still have all these unaddressed emotional issues lurking below the surface. It's not like the military at that time cared about how you felt, especially in the infantry. More stuffing and avoiding, more emotional injuries and issues are piling up in the basement that I've got them locked in. We start our entrepreneurial journey with a network marketing business. We built that for 20 years, made a decent six-figure income for a number of years, spoke to thousands of people for probably over the course of 15 years. Then we become financially independent at 30 years old. We replaced my wife's income when she was 27, replaced my income when I was 30. Amazing, right? On top of the world, right? How many 30-year-olds do you know that are financially independent? Probably not too many. And so what happened now, right? What did my wife and I do now that neither one of us have a job? We don't have to have a job anymore, right? We work even harder in our business, literally 7 days a week for 3 months straight. Then I completely crashed and burned. I told my wife, babe, check this out. I'm totally smoked. I barely know what day of the week it is. Let's take some time off. Again, let me remind you, I'm 30 years old and still completely emotionally clueless. Nothing in my emotional life has improved because for 3 full decades at the time, I've completely neglected anything to do with feelings and emotions. After a month of taking time off, I go into a deep depression for 2 years. Not 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. But I completely faked it while I was around other people. We continued to pretend like we were active in our business, but we weren't at all. For all intents and purposes, we completely stopped building our business because I am 100% emotionally shut down, emotionally paralyzed. Not quite a vegetable, but close, maybe more like a zombie, right? I had a pulse, but no one was home. Still going to church, still attending our business conferences, still speaking at business conferences, and still pretending, still faking, eroding from the inside out. After the 2 years of the valley of despair, we finally attended some spiritual counseling. And no doubt, it definitely provided a bit of reprieve, but not 100%. In fact, we addressed no emotional issues, only the spiritual ones, which again was very helpful and definitely a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole puzzle. I like asking this question: how many Christians do you know, or any faith background for that matter, that don't have any issues that they're struggling with? We all do. I've met some very emotionally immature, faith-filled people. Then, as we continued slogging along in our business, a pattern arose. The more success we achieved, the more I would sabotage our success. The more I would sabotage our business, ever so subtly. I was subconsciously being driven by my feelings of insecurity, imposter syndrome, unworthiness, unqualified, unvaluable, waste of oxygen, waste of skin. Try doing anything significant with your life with that kind of thought process, with those stories and beliefs running as scripts in the background of your mind, in your subconscious. The emotional issues and injuries were just piling up. I'm still stuffing and avoiding. I'm still getting triggered. I'm still getting emotionally hijacked. I still have no control over my emotions. What once was a cute, furry, fuzzy little monkey and stuffing and avoiding my emotions as a kid is now becoming a full-size emotional gorilla, an emotional King Kong. Emotional issues don't get better by avoiding them. Not much does. Let me say that again. Emotional issues don't get better by avoiding them. One step further, they build on each other. They grow. They get even worse. Pain and bitterness that's not transformed will be transferred. Pain and bitterness that's not transformed will be transferred to somewhere else in your life. It's like the biblical story of Jonah and the whale. When God told Big Jonah, you can run, but you can't hide, homie, right? From God or your emotions. You can't outrun, outwork, or avoid your emotional injuries. At some point, you have to face them or continue to live with the ever-growing consequences of not facing them. And over the past 20 years, I've been a part of at least 10 different startup businesses, from network marketing to, executive coaching, to we did some government contracting businesses with special operations soldiers, to medical imaging centers. I've been a limiting factor in each of those experiences due to my very low EQ or emotional intelligence. The final straw was when I yelled at my wife 3 or 4 times in the span of about a month. She came up to me, and she's like, bro, check this out. I got 3 things. Number 1, don't ever do that again. Don't ever yell at me again. Number 2, you've never done this before, which means number 3, you got issues, bro. Something is wrong with you. She was right, 100% right. I had no defense. I had no argument. I had no comeback. She smacked me in the face with the truth. My emotional King Kong had finally reached a point where I couldn't stuff and avoid any longer. I had held the basement doors closed for 4 decades, trying to keep him under control. I had been feeding him this whole time with no awareness and understanding of what I was doing until finally I couldn't hold him or my emotions and feelings hostage any longer. He busted out. We agreed to go to counseling. The counselor introduced me to this fascinating new concept called feelings and emotions. And my life has never been the same. And that was 3 or 4 years ago. So once I began my very intentional emotional growth journey and started doing very intentional emotional work and healing, which I believe God has absolutely been involved with, my whole life started to transform. Like no joke. In every area of my life. My faith started to grow. My marriage started to transform. My parenting started to transform. And not a day too soon, because now our daughter's a teenager. I don't know if you guys have teens in the house or have had teens in the house. I've lost almost 40 pounds after trying to diet and weight loss at least 30 to 40 different times over the past 2 decades. All those other times I had no idea there was an emotional component to my physical health. And after getting so many breakthroughs and getting so much traction in so many different areas of my life, I told Kathy, babe, we've got to do a podcast on all our lessons learned from our emotional growth journey. I can't be the only emotionally clueless guy out there. If I can help one other emotionally clueless person, I want to do it. I want to be a part of that. So that is why we started our podcast, our YouTube channel, and our business, EQ for Entrepreneurs. And what a blessing that we started it right before COVID started to become a thing. We started our podcast on emotional health and emotional intelligence in February of 2020. I know all the media and the news talks incessantly about COVID and everything like that, but very few people are talking about the massive increase in domestic abuse, suicide, depression, and a whole host of other mental and emotional side effects of locking a nation down, losing jobs, losing businesses, and social and emotional distancing. We want to help leaders and businesses to become more emotionally healthy and intelligent. EQ impacts an organization's culture and performance. Emotionally healthy people help heal other people emotionally. Emotionally healthy people help heal other people emotionally. So we hope you sign up for our waiting list for our EQ course at eqforentrepreneurs.com/EQA.